Now sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy. Much love to all.
Thus, when Gaius Octavius Thurinus was adopted by his great-uncle, Julius Caesar, his formal name became Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. At the time, those who addressed or referred to him respectfully would do so as Caesar or Gaius Caesar. Those who wished to be denigrating or disrespectful would use his adoptive Octavianus. Modern historians usually call him Octavian until he officially added the honorific Augustus, the revered one, to his name in 27 BCE. Names of citizen women. All female children of citizen families were named with the feminine form of the clan into which they were born. Hence, all women whose fathers had the nomen Julius were named Julia. And all women whose fathers had the nomen Cornelius were named Cornelia. In public, they would be identified by the possessive form of their father's cognomen, Julia Caesaris, Julia, the daughter of Caesar. Or if married, by the possessive form of their husband's cognomen, Clodia Metelli, Clodia, the wife of Metellus. If families had more than one daughter, they were distinguished by the words major and minor, or prima, secunda, tertia, etc. However, by the late Republic these conventions were changing slightly. In that elite Roman woman was sometimes designated by the feminine form of their father's nomen plus the feminine form of his cognomen, sometimes in the dominant, Livia, who married Octavian and became Rome's first empress, was often referred to as Livia Drusilla, since her father was a noble named Marcus Livius Drusus. Starting with Augustus, names of the most prominent women did not necessarily follow the Republican convention, but rather reflected the family connections that were most significant to the namers. For example, the two daughters of Augustus' daughter Julia, who was married to Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, would normally have been named Vipsania. Instead, one was called Julia and the other Agrippina. When Agrippina married Nero Claudius Germanicus, grandson of Livia, her three daughters were named Agrippina, Drusilla, and Julia Livilla, referring to the family lines of both of their distinguished great-grandparents, instead of Claudia, which would refer to their father's nomen. Names of freed people. When slaves were freed, they occupied a middle status between the freeborn and the enslaved. They were referred to as liberti or libertini, which we translate as freed people. While they were still enslaved, they had a single name, either a part of the name they had carried before they were enslaved or a name given to them by their master, often coming from mythology, referring to their country of origin, or referring to a personal characteristic. The slave's name, like everything else, was completely at the discretion of her owner. However, there were specific conventions that governed the names of freed people. A freedman took the praenomen and nomen of his former master, who was now his patron, plus his slave name as a cognomen. If he had been freed by a woman, he took her father's praenomen and nomen plus his slave name, e.g., Marcus Antonius' daughter Antonia freed a slave named Pallas, who was then called M. Antonius Pallas. Freed women took the feminine form of their masters, or mistresses, nomen plus their slave name, e.g., Antonia's freed slave woman Caenis became Antonia Caenis. If the freed person then contracted a legal marriage, the children born after this marriage were freeborn, and they often continued to bear the names of their father's patron. For example, According to an inscription from the 1st century BCE, a man named Publius Larsius freed a male slave named Nisha, who was then called Publius Larsius Nisha. And his freeborn sons were named Publius Larsius Rufus and Publius Larsius Brocchus. Publius Larsius Nisha later freed his own female slave named Horia, who was then named Larsia Horia. Possession of three names did not necessarily mean that a freedman was a Roman citizen. If his former master or mistress had been a Roman citizen and if he had been formally freed according to certain specific procedures and conditions, he would become a Roman citizen. However, if he had been freed informally by a Roman citizen, he would become a Junian Latin rather than a Roman citizen, even though his name would be the same. Thus only an indication of a voting tribe after his name would prove that the freedman was now a Roman citizen.
Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again soon. Till the next time, much love.